Welcome, Quantitative Research Methods, Module 8. We're going to talk about sampling techniques and samples and sampling methods in this module. Let's first look at our components of the research process sheet. We are working our way through these components of the research process, and we've talked about a little bit about design. Talked about hypotheses, variables, measurement when it comes to methodology. Talked about literature review. Talked about research problems and the characteristics of good research problems. So now we're going to talk about the who. The who of our research. Typically, the who in the social sciences, we're dealing with individuals. In the sciences, we could be dealing with a lot of different things. Molecules, just about anything. Trees. The social sciences, we're typically dealing with individuals and the human structures that we create. Groups, cities, companies, institutions. The unit of analysis is the basic element being analyzed. We have to know as a consumer of research what the researcher is talking about. To whom do they expect to generalize the findings? And we use samples of units to generalize findings to a population of units. And as I mentioned, those units that we're typically looking at in the social science are individuals. Most of what we know is based on partial observations, and sampling is the technique to get to those partial observations. The purpose of sampling is to select the people or the things that we want to study. Together, those things or those people have the same characteristics as the larger population to which we'd like to generalize our findings. I mean, we really want to be able to say, this is true for all of the students at my institution. And sometimes we just don't necessarily have the means to study all of the individuals at the institution or all of the K-12 students across the United States, or all of the students in higher education across the globe. We don't have the means to be able to do that, so we sample. But the purpose of good sampling methods and good sampling techniques, or one goal of sampling, is to have a sample that represents a population. Because it all depends, all of our generalizing, all of our findings, in order to be able to say this is true for this larger group, is based on how well that sample represents the population. Generalizability, or the ability to generalize to a population, is external validity. Our study has external validity when our sample is representative of a population. Let's talk about population and sample and the relationship between the two of them a little bit more. The population is the larger group to which we want to generalize our findings. As mentioned, typically for researchers in the social sciences, those populations are made up of individuals. So you can see by this Venn diagram that the sample is simply a smaller subset of a population. And this is called the theoretical population. That's the whole group, all the college students in the country, let's say. We have an accessible population. These are both of the theoretical and the accessible are related to populations. And then the sample is drawn from the accessible population. So it's a smaller subset, a much smaller subset. So for instance, in the example that I gave about wanting to be able to say something in relation to, let's say, student success at the college based on when somebody registers. So success in the semester based on when somebody registers. Let's say they register early, they register in an appropriate time frame, or they register late. How does timing of registration impact success in that semester? Well, if I want to look at that at my college, the theoretical population is all college students. All college students, let's say, across the United States. But I don't have access to all college students. I have access to the college students at my institution. So the accessible population are the college students at my college. And so I am going to draw my sample from the college students, or the students at my college, to come up with a subset. The accessible population can also be called the sampling frame. So I have this greater population that I'm interested in, college students. I have the accessible population, which is who I'm able to get to. That is my sampling frame. I can choose from all college students at my college to draw my sample. Let's take another look at what this could look like. So from population to sample. So if you look at the top picture, you see, who do you want to generalize to? Everybody, let's say everybody in the United States. That's my theoretical population. What population can I actually get access to? Well, let's say I have phone books, or no, I have voting records from everybody in the state of Michigan. So that's actually my study population, my accessible population. Voting records from everybody in the state of Michigan. That's how I'm going to get to the individuals in my study. How I access them is through those voter registration records. That's my sampling frame. Then I can select a subset from those voter registration records for my sample, a subset of that population. Sampling in social research basically developed with political polling. And the reason is because in political polling, there was a chance to check the results. Meaning you poll before an election, the election occurs, and you can quickly check the results of the polling. So to give an example of what it means to go from a theoretical population to an accessible population through a sampling frame. Polls basically kicked off in as early as the mid-1930s, when in the presidential race, the pollsters picked Landon over Roosevelt in 1936. Those people that were surveyed were taken from an automobile registry. That was the sampling frame, the automobile registry. So think that through. Who had automobiles in 1936? Probably those who were disproportionately wealthy or had access to resources. And those folks had or intended to vote for Langdon. Well, we know that we didn't have a president named Langdon. We had a president named Roosevelt. So in the end, a different type of voter than had automobiles came out to vote for Roosevelt and um, his New Deal policies. This ends this part of the module's presentation. Please move on to review the next part